Hi everyone, and welcome to our channel. Today I'll be talking about what is the COI, or coefficient of inbreeding, understanding the importance of genetic diversity in golden retrievers. As a side note, just want to take a moment to encourage you, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, follow us, head to our webpage at www.studleyhillgoldens.com or follow us on Instagram and Facebook for the latest and greatest. We greatly appreciate it. It helps us out tremendously. Thank you for your support. This is our little boasting page. Just want to let everyone know that we are Golden Retriever breeders of heart through the American Kennel Club. And that just basically means that we take special consideration for education and health promotion and health and breeding standards in our breeding stock. We also are breeders with Good Dog Breeding Program. We have several canine good citizens in our program, and our breeding practices are really important with regard to AKC standards and following the standards upheld by the Golden Retriever Club of America. Our purpose in breeding is to breed for family life, especially children, for work and companionship, and for service work, whether that be, diabetic alert dog, autism service dog, or even therapy dog. A little bit about me. I think it's important to know the breeder and the person who is giving you the information and all of the information about your puppy. I've been breeding since 2021 when I started my business, my LLC, Studley Hill Goldens. I'm mainly self-taught. I do a lot of research, I do a lot of education, but I also have had tremendous amounts of help from my great mentors within the breeding world. I am a PA, a physician assistant by training, so education, evidence-based medicine and medicinal practices, as well as research and understanding genetics and the basis for why we do what we do is really important to me, the ethical standpoint of breeding. I'm also a canine good citizen evaluator through the AKC. I'm a candidate for my dog training certification through CCPDT. I'm also studying to acquire my canine nutrition certification. And in our breeding program, genetic diversity is really paramount to us, along with temperament. As a disclaimer, for all the information within this slideshow, I do not have any ties to any affiliation or organization. This information and opinion are completely my own within this publication. So, why is this information important? Why should you care? If you've come to this place wanting to know about COI, whether it's getting a puppy from us or you're looking at another purebred dog, I really believe that informed buyers create better outcomes, both for families, for you, getting the dog, as the person acquiring the dog, but also for the dog itself, making sure that you're making a really good match and an ethical decision with your purchase, right? I also think it's important to change the dialogue and to really take a step back and step away from the traditional breeding world and really educate our clients, educate our people who are purchasing our puppies so that they can make the most informed decisions with their knowledge. And I really believe that this knowledge should be for everyone. I don't think that it should be kept with breeders. And I think that really, in order to better the breed, to make things better, we have to understand genetic diversity and the COI. So the importance of this is essentially listed in an article, which I'll reference later, and I'll also link below in the comments section. But essentially, it entails this extinction vortex, which the idea is that through a small population and inbreeding, we can lose that genetic variability or genetic diversity, which is so vital to a population. And this results in a reduction in fitness of the population, adaptability, variances in health, and it leads to lower reproduction rates and higher mortality, which essentially makes that population more likely to go extinct. So if we want to really keep Goldens forever, we need to make better, educated, informed decisions and ethical decisions about our breeding practices. And that's what we'll talk about today. So the COI, the coefficient of inbreeding, this is just a fancy way of saying, look, we're going to measure the overlap in genetics of the mother and father's lines. It's basically calculating the degree or percentage of inbreeding. So another way to look at it is the probability of inheriting two copies of the same allele. An allele is just a variation of a gene. And essentially, if we're looking at this, a COI of 10%, again, we look at COI in percentages, we will see that this translates to a 10% in the genes of that organism. So, say a dog, a golden, 10% of that shows that the genes are homozygous, meaning that mom and dad's copy are the exact same. So, again, COI of 10% means that 10% of the genes in that organism are homozygous or the same. Newsflash. uh, this might be news for you, but purebred dogs are inherently inbred. That's how purebred lines were started, by inbreeding and creating specific traits within those lines that are to be carried on for generation and generation. Now, that being said, there will be some degree of genetic overlap. So essentially, you won't see a COI of 0, right? The COI will be greater than 0%. Now, how much of percent, that's really the key. And that's really why we really should care about this and why it matters. So the COI was developed as a way for breeders to understand and determine the risk. So using COI essentially helps us to weigh, as breeders, the benefit versus risk of a certain pairing. Now, a breeder ultimately is going to decide what is an acceptable balance and at what cost. So at a low risk, the COI might be low, but that might give a modest benefit, right? We don't have traits that are carried on. Whereas with a high COI, we do have traits that benefit, but we're going to lose those specific health characteristics that are vital to the breed. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit further. So, again, the pros and cons. A low COI means that there's more genetic diversity, so your population is going to be essentially, in general, healthier, more robust. You're going to have larger litter sizes based statistically, improved mortality. The negative or the downside is you're not going to have traits that are as reproducible. And this is what's so vital as a breeder and someone who really takes into consideration temperament within my breeding stock is, I take such pride in being able to hand a golden retriever over to a family, specifically a young child, and to tell that family to a certain degree of certainty this dog is going to have a great temperament. I can tell based on the lineages and the selective breeding that this dog is going to, if treated well and if trained properly and, raised in a good home, they're going to have a wonderful, well-rounded temperament. Now, with a high COI, the downsides are, again, reduced fertility, some health problems, increased risk for disease, loss of that genetic diversity, and what I call a loss of vigor, essentially, losing those unique characteristics, perhaps that persona or, that specific characteristic of the dog, right? Their character, their zest, their personality. But the benefit is you have consistent and predictable traits. Now, beware of values. Now, this is a really interesting point to note. And when you're looking around and looking at different breeding sites, different breeders, sometimes the COI is reported differently. I don't know if this is done purposefully or just because there are differences in understanding or how it's represented. But it's important to note that COI is done in percentages, right? So what we're really looking at is percentage. Don't let 0.15 fool you. That's still 15%, right? So, you might look at 0.15 and say, wow, that's a great low COI. No, it's still telling you it's 15%, right? So again, I don't know if that's deliberate to be kind of misleading or just a different way of representing it. But always remember that these values of COI are in percentages. Now, I have clients often ask me, Tammy, what's a good number? And realistically, we should really be measuring this instead as a degree of risk, right? What's the risk factor? What's the level of risk with this COI? Rather than assigning a qualitative value like good or bad. And realistically, this is going to depend on the breed. COI is going to vary based on breed, and it's also going to be varied based on how we calculate it. So, in general, negative effects start to occur with a COI of around 5% in a population. If the COI is about 10%, we do see a loss of vitality and mutations. And then around 15%, we do start to see those detrimental effects start to affect the breed as a whole. So, those are just some general numbers to keep in mind. For Goldens in particular, again, for a purebred dog, less than 10 as a COI is ideal, but again, not likely. And we'll talk about this for Goldens. Unfortunately, I shouldn't be laughing. It's really unfortunate and sad, but I'm hoping to kind of change this percentage as we go along with our breeding program. I have seen reports online where a breed average is quoted at around 8%, and this kind of leads me to question this, and we'll touch on this in a second of exactly how that 8% is calculated. Overall, as a breeder, the ranges that I see for golden retrievers are around 5 to 20%. Now, have I had breeding stock and dogs that average out at around 30%? Wow, that's a really high number. And the answer is yeah, I would keep that dog in my breeding stock if the price is right, right? Like if that dog has great characteristics, overall wonderful temperament, they're getting titled in numerous things, they have wonderful potential, they're a great family dog, they're great for service work. Yeah, I'd consider breeding them, but I'd also try and lower that COI with a great pairing in a stud or a female that has a lower COI. Unfortunately, though, what we're seeing in a lot of the more established lines, what I'm seeing personally, again, my own opinion, my own observations, is that a lot of these more established lines, whether it's field or show, are really coming up at this 30%, and that's actually quite concerning to me. And again, we need to really look at how this COI is calculated. So, how do we calculate the COI? Well, the old way is to look at essentially the pedigree, looking at 5 generation, 10 generation, or the whole pedigree. And this is really done through statistical analysis. So, you can imagine that can allow for deletions or non inclusions that would skew the numbers, so to speak. I don't want to really give away the answer here, but I'm favoring the approach of DNA analysis, which is more up and coming. You can do this through certain genetic organizations and companies such as Embark. Again, I'm not endorsed by Embark. I do purchase the genetic testing kits through Embark. I really believe in them. I think it's a great product. I've had great luck with them. And essentially, how we do this is through analyzing SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are just little changes in the genetic sequence, and through sequencing the whole genome, which is actually really interesting. So, when we look at comparing the pedigree of the COI, the pedigree COI, if we calculate it based on pedigree, the danger is that if we're just looking at this green line, which is a 5 generation pedigree versus, say, a 10 generation pedigree, there's a huge discrepancy in the average COI of those calculations. So, based on what you're looking at, based on the analysis and the data, your numbers can be really off. And this is actually taken from a study done by a wonderful researcher, which I'll link in the comment section through the Institute of Canine Biology. So again, touching on this, in the highlighted area, we see for golden retrievers, the COI can vary greatly based on how it's calculated. So if we're looking at a full pedigree, for example, sure, it shows a great 0.16 or 16%. However, when we look at SNPs or those segments of the genome through genomic sequencing, through some organization like, say, Embark, you're going to come up with a number that's quite higher. And so, on average, when we're looking at sequencing through um, sequencing the COI through genetic analysis, your numbers are going to come out higher than how you would calculate it versus a pedigree. And this is really where I think that discrepancy comes out in the numbers. And when clients come to me and they say, well, there's huge discrepancies in this research and I don't know what's a good number, right? So realistically, what we should be looking at again is what is the risk and what is the more accurate analysis, which I'm leaning towards the genetics sequencing, which is pretty much what the up and coming research is suggesting. Now, again, this article by Dr. Carol Bouchat, I hope I am pronouncing that correctly, a wonderful researcher through the Institute of Canine Biology, published a study based on some research from Dredger et al. From an article in 2016, which studied, we'll look at a closer look at COI calculations. Now, this is looking at the green, yellow, and red lines represent what a COI would be if you were to mate first cousins. Yellow is half siblings. Red is a full sibling cross at 25%. And for golden retrievers, way down here at the bottom right, we can see that they come in at a whopping around 25% for their actual genomic sequencing through the SNPs. So what we're seeing is that a lot of breeds are having inbreeding that are about 25% or higher. In fact, there are perhaps 20 breeds with inbreeding of less than 25%, and the rest are 25% or more, which is pretty shocking. Now, this is actually a segment from my boy Sven's analysis through Embark. And what you can see here is a nice curve represented by the bars for standards for golden retriever. The solid line on that curve represents all purebred dogs, and his line of COI is somewhere around 17%, which is a nice average kind of in the middle of where most golden retrievers are on average nestled in. Again, you can see that average is between 10 to 20%. But it's important to remember that, again, even though this is a pretty good number comparison, in comparison to other lines, we still need to lower the COI whenever we can, whenever possible, whenever feasible through good breeding practices. And we can do that by outsourcing or breeding out dogs that are, far from us. We try and gather dogs from all over the United States, but we're even looking at importing golden retrievers from other countries. But it's important to just look at this as a whole and to remember that this is just a larger piece of the puzzle. So then my question is, can we have both? Can we have the benefits of breeding for purpose as well as keeping those ethical considerations? And I'd really like to know what you think. Again, I'm not any expert on this, but I really believe in respecting the breed and the importance of health over the aesthetics. Now, a lot of what I'm seeing in modern times is, whether we're looking at field line or show line, or even the English cream variety or the red golden, is we're looking at aesthetics rather than valuing the bigger picture, in which health, I think, and temperament play an even greater role, which is what I'd like to start a conversation about. Now, as you can see, there's a huge variety in the aesthetic that you can get for golden retrievers. And I think that the real benefit of this is that as long as you follow the tenets of the Golden Retriever Club of America, the standards that are set forth for general guidelines, and as long as you're following those and adhering to those as much as possible, as well as the health and temperament, realistically, you have a lot of variability to play with here in terms of, meshing that genetic diversity. So instead of just breeding a show and a show golden or a field and a field, what we are trying to do with our lines is somehow creating a cross between field line and show to help improve that genetic diversity, keep that golden retriever breed standard, but also give our clients a really well-rounded, wholesome dog that will be, you know, kept around for generations and generations to come. And really, that's the most important thing. So, how we do this, how do we preserve the breed for our children and our children's children? The way that we do that is by valuing health over aesthetics. Again, like I said, there's many variations, and as long as we're following the standards for, what golden retrievers ought to look like, there is a lot of in my opinion, I think there can be some variations in that. I think that again, we should get away from breeding just show or just field, or for a certain aesthetic. If we want to really make this a longevity thing, and we really want to make this breed sustainable for our children and make it a healthier breed, we really need to be looking at how do we diversify the genetics, and that's not just through meshing different aesthetics, but also looking at the genetics, the genotype. So not just looking at the phenotype, but the genotype. So for any dog purchaser of a purebred dog, I really encourage you not to invest based on looks alone. If you have a puppy from a breeder that's really reputable and has great genetic profile versus a dog that might look a little bit prettier or have a certain coat color, I would recommend, for the longevity of your investment, right? For a 10 to 12 to 15-year investment, look at the health and the temperament of the dog first, and really go with a breeder that's going to health test their dogs, who's going to do the, conformation, the health testing through OFA, the genetic testing, etc. Really, we want to value in our program temperament and personality. We don't want to lose that personality and that golden retriever spirit. And so I encourage people to go with breeders that are reputable, ethical breeders that keep the standards in mind, but are also conscious about their decisions with regard to genetic diversity. And that's really how we're going to win. So in all, again, COI, or coefficient of inbreeding, is just one small piece in my mind of the bigger puzzle. So, if you have a dog that has a pretty average or maybe below the average of golden retrievers for COI, and they also have all these other wonderful characteristics like working ability, they have wonderful human connection, they'd make a great service prospect, they adhere by and large to the breed standards set forth by the Golden Retriever Club of America, if they have great health characteristics like, passing OFA scores for hips, elbows, eyes, and heart, if their genetic testing comes back all clear, if their temperament is wonderful or the parent's temperament is wonderful, really you have a well-rounded dog, and you're looking at a breeder who really values the breed as a whole. And this isn't just for golden retrievers. This goes for all dogs, right? And you can kind of, mesh different pieces of the puzzle in here depending on the breed that you're looking at, depending on what you're breeding for. But this is really the whole point of breeding for purpose and breeding to a specific standard, is that while it's important to keep in mind that, yes, there are dogs out there that need to be adopted, there are dogs in shelters, adopt, don't shop, I understand that claim, but also there is a huge value and asset to breeding for a specific purpose and a specific standard. And I really stand by that for both the breed and for my family, because golden retrievers make a wonderful family dog, a wonderful service animal, and a wonderful working dog, both in the field and by my side for disability purposes. They're just a wonderful, wonderful animal. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you listening to my nerd out session on COI. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me via our website, or you can just drop me an email at any time. Thanks so much. Take care. Stay golden.